Picture this. It's November 24th, 1326, in the heart of England. A massive crowd gathers, their breath visible in the cold morning air, eyes fixed on a single man standing on a scaffold. This isn't just any man. He's Hugh Dispenser, once the most powerful figure at King Edward II's side. Now shackled, humiliated, and facing a fate so gruesome it will echo through history. His body will be broken, his dignity stripped, and his legacy erased in a spectacle of violence that shocks even the most hardened onlookers. How did a man who held England in his grasp fall so far? And what does the story teach us about power, ambition, and the cost of overreaching? Stay with us as we unravel the dramatic rise and brutal fall of Hugh Dispenser. And if you're as gripped by the story as I am, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to join us on this journey through history's darkest chapters. Let's rewind to the late 1310s, a time when England was a kingdom teetering on the edge of chaos. King Edward II sat on the throne, a ruler more interested in personal loyalties than governing a fractious nation. Enter Hugh Dispenser, a man who wasn't born into greatness but had a knack for seizing it. Unlike the battle-hardened knights of his day, Hugh's weapon wasn't a sword. It was his charm, his cunning, and his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. Hugh's story begins modestly. Born into a family of minor nobility, he wasn't destined for the spotlight. But he had something others didn't, an almost magnetic ability to win trust. By the late 1310s, he caught the eye of Edward II, a king desperate for loyal allies in a court filled with scheming barons. Edward was a man who leaned heavily on his favorites, and Hugh? He knew exactly how to become indispensable. Through calculated moves, Hugh aligned himself with the right people, royal insiders, influential barons, even members of Edward's own family. He didn't just climb the ladder, he built his own. By 1320, Hugh was no longer just a courtier. He was the king's right hand, showered with lands, titles, and wealth. Castles, estates, and riches poured into his hands, each grant a testament to Edward's trust. But here's the thing about power. It's a flame that warms you until it burns. Hugh's rise wasn't just about loyalty, it was about ambition. And ambition, my friends, can be a dangerous spark. As Hugh's influence grew, so did the whispers. The barons, already resentful of Edward's weak leadership, saw Hugh as a threat, a nobody who'd risen too far, too fast. Think about your own ambitions. What's the spark driving you? Like Hugh, we all have dreams that push us forward, but his story reminds us to balance ambition with wisdom. Keep chasing your goals, but never lose sight of those around you. They could be your allies or your downfall. If this resonates, hit that like button and share the story with someone chasing their own dreams. By the early 1320s, Hugh Dispenser wasn't just a trusted advisor. He was the silent force behind the throne. Edward II, distracted by personal matters and his controversial relationships, leaned on Hugh more than ever. The king's court was a tangled web of rivalries, and Hugh wove himself into its very center. Edward's reliance on his favorites wasn't new. Before Hugh, there was Piers Gaveston, another favorite whose closeness to the king had sparked outrage among the nobility. Gaveston's story ended in blood, a warning Hugh should have heeded. But Hugh was different, or so he thought. Where Gaveston was brash, Hugh was subtle. Where Gaveston flaunted his power, Hugh wielded it quietly, pulling strings from the shadows. As Edward's trust in Hugh deepened, so did the rewards. Vast estates in the Welsh marches, control over key political appointments, even influence over royal policy. Hugh had it all. He wasn't just a courtier anymore. He was a power broker, a man who could make or break fortunes with a whisper in the king's ear. But power like that comes with a price. The more Hugh gained, the more enemies he made. The barons, already frustrated by Edward's indecision, saw Hugh as a parasite feeding on the king's weakness. His control over land and wealth wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a direct challenge to their authority. And in medieval England, challenging the nobility was like poking a sleeping dragon. Have you ever felt like you're finally on top, only to realize you've made enemies along the way? Hugh's story shows us that success isn't just about climbing, it's about building bridges, not burning them. Keep pushing forward, but stay mindful of the relationships you nurture. If you're loving this dive into history, subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and teach. While Hugh basked in the king's favor, a storm was brewing, one that would prove his undoing. At the heart of it was Queen Isabella of France, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her resolve. Isabella's marriage to Edward II had been a political alliance, but it was far from a fairy tale. Edward's affection for his favorites, particularly Hugh, left Isabella sidelined, her influence at court dwindling. By the mid-1320s, Isabella's patience had worn thin. She was a queen, not a pawn, and she refused to be humiliated any longer. Her frustration wasn't just personal, it was political. Hugh's dominance threatened her son's future claim to the throne, and that was a line she wouldn't let him cross. Enter Roger Mortimer, a baron with his own score to settle. Mortimer had been imprisoned by Hugh after a failed rebellion, and his escape only fueled his hunger for revenge. Together, Isabella and Mortimer formed a secret alliance, united by their hatred of Hugh and their ambition to reshape England's future. This wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was a masterclass in strategy. Isabella and Mortimer didn't just want Hugh gone, they wanted to dismantle his entire network. They rallied disgruntled barons, stoked unrest among the commoners, and exploited Edward's growing unpopularity. Hugh, for all his cunning, had underestimated the power of a united opposition. The tide was turning, and Hugh's grip on power was slipping. His arrogance, once his strength, became his fatal flaw. He believed Edward's loyalty would protect him, but loyalty is a fragile shield when a kingdom is at stake. Isabella and Mortimer remind us that even in our darkest moments, we can find allies who share our vision. Don't let setbacks define you. Find your team, build your strategy, and fight for what you believe in. If this story's got you hooked, share it with a friend who loves a good comeback tale. By 1326, the storm Hugh had ignored was upon him. Isabella and Mortimer, now openly defying Edward, landed in England with a small but determined force. The country, weary of Edward's misrule and Hugh's overreach, rallied to their cause. Barons, knights, even commoners joined the rebellion, their resentment of Hugh uniting them in a way he'd never anticipated. Hugh tried to hold the line, using his influence over Edward to rally loyalists, but it was too late. The king's indecision, once Hugh's greatest asset, became his downfall. Edward's forces crumbled, and Hugh was captured in November 1326, his once mighty empire reduced to nothing. His trial was a formality, no defense, no mercy. The verdict was clear: Hugh Dispenser would pay for his ambition with his life. But this wasn't to be a quiet execution. It was to be a spectacle, a public dismantling of a man who dared to rise too high. On November 24th, 1326, Hugh was led to Tyburn Hill, a place synonymous with death. The crowd was immense, their silence heavy with anticipation. Hugh, once cloaked in wealth and power, stood shackled and broken. The noose was the first step, a brief hanging meant to weaken him. But what followed was far worse. The executioners cut him down, still alive, and began a punishment so brutal it would haunt England for generations. In a public act of castration, they stripped Hugh of his masculinity, a symbolic destruction of his identity. The crowd gasped, some in horror, others in grim satisfaction. Then came the disembowelment, his organs displayed as a final act of disgrace. His severed head was mounted on a pike, paraded through London's streets, a grim trophy of a fallen giant. This wasn't just an execution, it was a message. Hugh Dispenser's death was a warning to anyone who dared challenge the balance of power. His body, broken and desecrated, was a symbol of the consequences of unchecked ambition. Hugh's fall teaches us that power without humility is a recipe for ruin. Stay grounded, stay kind, and never let success blind you to the bigger picture. If this story's hit home, hit that like button and subscribe for more lessons from history's greatest dramas. Hugh Dispenser's death marked a turning point in English history. His execution wasn't just the end of a man, it was the unraveling of Edward II's reign. The king, stripped of his closest ally, was vulnerable. Within months, Isabella and Mortimer forced Edward to abdicate, placing his young son, Edward III, on the throne under their control. Hugh's lands and titles were seized, redistributed to his enemies in a bitter irony. His followers, once loyal, scattered or faced their own punishments. The man who'd once held England in his grasp was erased, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. But the story doesn't end there. Hugh's execution sent ripples through the kingdom, reshaping the very nature of royal power. It was a reminder that no one, not even the king's favorite, was untouchable. The brutality of his death, particularly the public castration, carried a deeper meaning, a symbolic stripping of power, a warning to the ambitious. For Isabella and Mortimer, it was a triumph, but one that came with its own shadows. Their victory was built on blood, and their own power would soon face its own challenges. History, after all, is a cycle of rise and fall, and no one escapes its wheel. Hugh's story is a reminder that every ending is a new beginning. Even in defeat, there's a lesson to carry forward. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop chasing your own story. If you've been inspired by this tale, share it with someone who needs a reminder to stay resilient. And there you have it, the rise and fall of Hugh Dispenser, a man who soared to the heights of power only to crash in a blaze of infamy. His story is a mirror for our own ambitions, a reminder to balance our dreams with wisdom and humility. If you've been gripped by this tale of power, betrayal, and brutal justice, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that bring history to life. Your support keeps us diving into the past, uncovering lessons that inspire us to shape a better future. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on Hugh's story. What would you have done in his shoes? How do you balance ambition with caution? And if you're as passionate about history as we are, join our community by subscribing and turning on notifications for our next deep dive. Together, we'll keep exploring the stories that shaped our world. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep chasing your dreams, but maybe with a little less arrogance than Hugh Dispenser.